everybody, this is Kara. Her and I met first when she contacted me about turning one of her dad's handwriting into a piece of jewelry, and she's wearing it. And we met a few times and we've spoken a bunch. And when I mentioned that I would be doing this, she reached out to me and said that she would love to join and talk about her experience with grief and her dad and her support system and all of that. So I guess first and foremost, tell us a little bit about yourself, your dad, whatever you want. You go for it.
Platform. Well, to start, I'll just say I have my picture right here. It's my favorite picture of him, and a little Dunkin' circle for our Dunkin' Donuts, but I'll be looking at him when I talk, and I'm a little nervous, but that's okay. So hi guys, this is so weird. I'm just gonna pretend I'm talking to Romy. I'm Kara. I am 25, almost 26. Where to start? I was a caretaker to my dad. Wow, this is so weird.
Woo. Like, take a second if you need to. Like, I know it's a lot. And also I'm sure a lot of you guys know Kara, but this is also new for her. Her dad didn't pass that long ago, so it's fresh.
So I was a caretaker for my dad, primary caretaker, Mark. He is the greatest guy in the world. I guess I'll start by kind of sharing a little bit about him, who he is, and my path over the last few years. So first of all, he's the greatest guy. He was the go-to guy for everyone, his friends, our friends, our family. He was an all-time athlete. He was a junior Olympic level hockey player. He was a serial entrepreneur, so he started, built and sold several businesses over the years. He, had so many amazing friends who are still our friends today. He was just the guy that everybody wanted advice from. People called him when they needed something, and he never expected anything in return. He was a giver, like a total giver. It's funny because our house used to be the party house, and all of our friends would literally line up outside his office just waiting to talk to Mark Byron. Like, no matter what we were doing in the basement, no matter what we were doing, it was all about Dad. He worked really, really hard. He built himself up from nothing, and created his own definition of success, I would say. He traveled so much during the week, but he never seemed to miss any performance, any recital, any game that me or the girls ever had. When we saw him in the stands or on the court or wherever it was like our greatest joy. Even if he was in Chicago one morning, he was home to watch our dance class that night. So he was a hard worker, but it was always family first, no matter what. And that kind of stuck with us through life. You can ask me, you can ask my sisters, my mom. It's family first, no matter what. So that's all him. He created a legacy for himself where it's like his energy is infectious. Mark walks into a room, everyone's like, Mark's here, everything's going to be okay. Because for him, it was always about other people enjoying the experiences, other people enjoying, the event, whatever we were doing, the gathering. He just wanted everyone else to enjoy life and to always feel like they were taken care of. He was a caretaker starting at the age of 8. He took care of me, and he took care of us. He took care of my mom. He took care of our whole family, a lot of his friends. So that was a little bit about him, pre-diagnosis. And then I guess I can start going into that phase or give a little bit about myself, whatever you think.
You tell me. I mean, I think it's also just, I think the fact that you were when people's parents get sick, it's already very difficult, just the emotional stress that you put yourself through and going to the hospital and doctor's appointments. But I think the fact that you were his actual caretaker in addition to his daughter, I think that that, is important for people to hear, because I would imagine it's just a completely different aspect to going through this process and the grief that probably comes afterwards than somebody who maybe isn't a caretaker. So again, like whatever you think that you should share or that you want to share, you tell me.
Yeah, so you know a little bit about my story, but I went to USC undergrad and I graduated in 2017. And then I went on to get my master's in social work directly from undergrad. So I went back to New York and I went to Fordham, and I started a really, really awesome entrepreneurial program there, which ultimately led me to being the commencement speaker. So I spoke in front of 7,000 people, which for some reason this seems more nerve-wracking than that. Maybe because he was like up front and center, hysterically crying in my face. But after school, for those 2 years of grad school, I was living in New York, but I would say I was mostly at home in New Jersey with him. I probably spent a night or two, if that, at my apartment in the city. So I was pretty much with him from 2017 on. I did a little bit of consulting work shortly after grad school, but just with his progression and some other health challenges in the family, I decided to take a step back and just be with him full time. Mm. That's kind of my story, I guess, professionally or educationally, but I'll back up a minute to just talk about his diagnosis. And I'm like looking down at him. It's so funny.
That's so happy in that picture. He has the biggest smile.
Always the biggest smile. He was diagnosed in 2015 with a rare neurodegenerative disease called MSA-C. It's a disease very similar to ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, or a part of Parkinson's disease, sort of. That's, I guess, the best way to compare it. It's a very rare disease where cognitively you're 100% there and physically you're not, and you have a lot of limitations. And so in 2015, he was a little overweight. He loved to eat. He's like the biggest foodie in the world. He would get giant bowls of Chinese food and cereal and dinner. And eventually the girls and I were like, Dad, we got to put you on a strict diet here. What's going on? And so we did, and one of the biggest things that went on during his diet was lack of salt. And this kind of triggered, I guess, and spiraled into more fainting spells in 2015. And then one night, ultimately, he fainted and he broke some ribs. And we were like, Dad, you've got to go to the hospital and figure this out. He was really stubborn, so he didn't.
My dad.
Yeah, stubborn, like he can take care of himself. He can do everything on his own. Never wanted to be a burden to anybody. So for him, it was like, I'm fine. And then finally, in the summer of 2015, we got this diagnosis. And I don't think it quite registered with me yet, or maybe even the girls too, just because you hear a diagnosis like this that's so rare and you have no idea what it is. And eventually, over time we learned, and most doctors hadn't even heard of what MSA is. Most people that we've spoken with, I don't know if you had ever heard of it before.
Candidly, since I knew that you and I were going to be having this conversation, I just wanted to do some of my own research. So I went on the organization's website and actually watched like a few videos on it. And yeah, it seems like not only did not a lot of doctors know what it is, but it's hard to diagnose because the symptoms present as so many different things. So, and there's also, like extremes to it. Like some people don't suffer from as many symptoms as others may.
Yeah, that's the odd thing about this. Well, it's every single person presents so differently. So a lot of the people that we eventually met with MSA, which I'll get to in a minute when I started support groups out of NYU, they were all in their 70s and 80s, the patients. And then, here my dad is in his 50s, and his symptoms were really different than everyone else. He was at a much more progressed stage than everyone else that we had come in contact to, at least. But yeah, I guess when he was first diagnosed, we did as much research as we could, and his whole mindset was, I'm fine until I'm not. That was his motto. And his other motto was mind over matter. So he never identified himself as sick. It was always, I have this condition, I have limitations. Let's move on with our day.
Because truthfully, I do believe, just from witnessing other people who have been sick, if you think very positively and to your dad's point, live until you can't anymore, there's a reason why you have to take a step back. They always really did do better than people who had a negative outlook or were down on themselves and said, this is it, I'm going to give up.
And that's exactly what he did. It was mind over matter always. So he was walking until the very last day when he couldn't. Last day meaning until we moved to the wheelchair. I think for him, he knew what this was, or we all knew what this was, and it was about accepting the next limitation. And when we limitation, we were going to figure out how to do it. So I guess over the years, my sisters and I built a private duty nursing company where we recruited and staffed and trained usually ER techs and nurses. Over the course of the last 5 years, we've had upwards of 20 who have all become like family. They were always ingrained in our family. We were, it was in 12-hour shifts. So, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. So there was always someone in our house until the quarantine. And they were truly a part of our family, and we would not have gotten through anything without them. I think the interesting part, though, is that we learned a lot of things that most people at my age don't learn. I quickly had to learn how to, I guess, become like a nurse.
Yeah.
Doing things that a lot of people don't do, and it was really hard to relate to others in my particular situation. A lot of my friends, they went to college and then they graduated and they went on into their careers and they went on to pursue a master's, and they're kind of on their path. For me, it was a little bit different. And I truly believe that I don't have one path, and that without these experiences with my dad, which I would never change and would never regret, I wouldn't be who I am and wouldn't be where I am today. I had to grow up a lot faster than a lot of people. I had his life in my hands at all times, 24/7. And when you're responsible for another person's life, it makes you think about your priorities, and it makes you think about the kind of person that you are. And I guess what I would say is we had a very unique relationship. He did with all of us.
From all of the pictures that I see, I mean, it is honestly so unbelievable. You guys, you can tell he loved you and your sisters so much. Like, light of his, like, to see somebody who's, obviously struggling with whatever is going on with their body, and then to see a smile like that in every photo that I've ever seen of him with you and your sisters, it's like nothing else mattered. As long as he had you guys, then whatever was going on with him was irrelevant.
He was a girl dad, a true girl dad.
Had three.
Big with his words. So all throughout our lives, it was all about our cards and our letters. So you'll ask my sisters, you'll ask anyone in our family. We never want any gifts. We never want any items or anything. So long as we have our cards and our letters, we're good. So when we each went to college, he wrote us 10-page letters. Every Valentine's Day, he writes us a letter. No matter where in the world we are, when my sisters and I were abroad, I was in Singapore one year. Jenna was in like some hostel in Thailand. We all got our roses and we all got our cards, and he never skipped a beat. So he's a very, very special guy. He's a girl dad. And so I'd say something he always said to me in my letters was, you and I are virtually one and the same. My dad truly thought that he and I were like connected like this. And so when he progressed, and I kind of took on being his primary caretaker, a lot of boundaries were crossed, a lot of roles were reversed. I quickly became someone who was bathing and dressing and brushing his teeth and walking him and doing all these things that you don't really do as a child or a young, child. So my dad and I were super close. And I think a large part of it was physical, especially towards the end, meaning when he lost the ability to talk, it was all about communicating in other ways. So it was through holding my hand and hand motions or eye movements that we learned with each other, or like blowing me kisses and things like that. So I think, of course, it's really hard to grieve somebody who's not here, and you can think about the memories and the moments with them. But for me, it's like the physical being as well, just because that was the nature of our relationship. And I think, I could talk about him for days, but I think the most important thing is that I feel like I'm finally in a place where I love talking about him. I've always loved talking about him, but I feel okay talking about him. He's a legend, and his will and his power to move forward every day blew people away. His doctors maybe gave him a few years. He completely exceeded their expectations. They thought my sisters and I were giving him some weird potions. This guy's still going. How is he going to the office every day? And how is he doing all these things? And it was because of his spirit. Yeah. And no matter how limited he was physically, we never let that get in the way. So we always made sure that his normal was normal, meaning we still took him to the office. He would dictate, we would write. We would set up for friends to come to the office and visit him. We would still go out and live life. We made it so that he could live his life and have a quality of life that was comfortable and safe. He could, he still saw his friends, and so long as one of me and my sisters or my mom was there, he could talk through us and communicate to them. And as it progressed and moved forward, his friends were made aware that they can come over and they can tell him stories, and he's cognitively there. I mean, he's probably smarter than anyone in the room. But
he just,
yeah, so
incredibly fresh for, I'm sure, mostly him, and then of course you guys, because you're having to sort of unfortunately witness it happening.
Well, that's the thing too. It's like, I tried to put myself in his position so many times and imagine how frustrated he must have been if he wanted something or he was trying to get an idea across, but the only thing that could come out was one word.
Yeah.
And we tried to allow him as much freedom or give him as much freedom as possible. Mm-hmm. So in his disease, you have to keep your eyes on him at 24/7. There's a huge risk of aspirating, a huge risk of choking, and so there were eyes on him 24/7. And that must have been really frustrating for him too. He's a private dude. He, wants to do his own thing sometimes, and when he became dependent on others, he lost a lot in a sense, but you would never tell because of his energy and his.
He just all yeah. And You girls. I mean, like you said, he was a girl dad, so just having you around, I'm sure that brought enough joy to his life that it was worth him dealing with all of the negatives that came from whatever he was losing and unfortunately having to have care 24/7, which I know for somebody, my dad included, who was so independent and full of life and just loved to live and do what they wanted to do. And also, my dad had a huge personality and was like the life of the party, to have people caring for them when they're so used to caring for you and making sure that you have everything you need. It's definitely very frustrating. But just from what I know of you and from what you've told me about your sister, is having the fact that he had you girls to physically be there and care for him. I don't think like that's something that you guys will never ever be able to, forget or give back. And it's the same thing for me in the sense that I was able to be with my dad the last month because his situation happened so quickly. Like I will never forget that. I am so grateful for it because I know as much as it meant to me, it meant to him having people he felt safe and comfortable with and knew loved him more than anything in the world. Yeah, it makes a huge difference.
It does. I would say too, like I don't know, over the years, my sisters would always ask me too, like, Tara, what do you want to do in your next phase of life? You have your master's, you're taking on the responsibility, the weight of the world on your shoulders that no one at your age has done. Like, you can literally do whatever you want after this. Do you ever have any ideas? Do you ever think about that, next phase? And I would always say to them, it was hard for me to think like that just because in my mind I was so present and I didn't think maybe I didn't think there was ever going to be that next phase. But I would always say to the girls, I'm not exactly 100% sure yet, but what I do know is that whatever I do, I want to make meaningful moments for people. And I want people to feel the joy and the happiness that my dad felt when we were around, and for what we did, for him. It's funny, my sister surprised me at the beginning of the quarantine with this brand called Making Meaningful Moments. And
Hear more about this because I know enough from what I've looked up, but you and I have never really fully talked about what it is. So tell us because this is amazing. In my mind, like this is a perfect example of you taking grief, like real raw grief, and turning it into something good, which is what this is all about. So tell us.
yeah, exactly. So I would say over the last few years, I've been doing now what we call moments for my family and my dad and my sisters, friends, extended family, where it could really range from anything from a thoughtful creative gift based on someone's story or experience to a themed night or an intimate dinner or a really carefully curated meal that was all about, that person or whatever it was. I've been doing these over the last few years for him because for somebody in his position, your days can get very routine and very mundane. And don't get me wrong, he was a very routine guy. We had our
Right.
daily. But when you don't have the little things in life to, engage with and to find joy in, it's almost like, then why is it worth it? You
Yeah.
know, I brought these in as a way to spark energy and to give him life and love. And they just coined this term moments for me. And when they presented me with this, platform, they were like, either do nothing with it, do it as a passion project, maybe one day scale it, turn it into a business. Like, you have something here. This is what people need in life. Um, I'll talk about, my last few months in a moment, but what I will say is that I'm finally at a point where I'm going back down that path right now. I'm having wonderful conversations with so many people, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of my dad's friends, a lot of my friends. Um, for me, it's whatever I do next in this next phase of life, I want to love it and I want to be passionate about it. Um, I have so much energy. I spent a lot of time just working on myself, and I don't feel exhausted anymore. And I'm just so ready for the next step. And so I think this could turn into something big. I think for me, it was my dad. For others, I hope it's this pandemic and COVID and just a time where people are reprioritizing their life, their perspective on life, their priorities. And so the biggest takeaway that I've learned and that makes me really excited about meaningful moments is time is a gift and time is precious and you don't have a lot of it. And it's one thing, in society and in culture, you celebrate the milestones, the birthdays, the graduations, the babies, the marriages. But if you're not celebrating the moments in between, then, that's what you're going to regret later in life. It's about the moments in between. It's about the everyday. You need to be happy every day because you don't know what tomorrow will bring. And so if I can curate and craft cool moments for people and their loved ones, their colleagues, their children, whatever it might be, that's worth it to me because it's those moments that they're going to remember later in life and that they're going to think back to. Nothing is more important than human connection and your family. And like, that's my definition of success. It's doing something that I love where I can make a living for myself and working really hard at changing people's lives and making an impact and giving them the space to connect with their families and to have what I have. I vividly remember so many times I would be setting up a moment here and there in the house. And in quarantine, we had to get creative. So
give us an example. Well, I think I saw one of them was the father-daughter dance.
Yeah. So I'll tell you about that, and then I'll tell you about a really cool moment we did one time. Well, I'll start with that. My sister Lexi's getting married in October, and Dylan, and she had asked Jenna and I to be her maids of honor during the quarantine in a really fun way, so my dad could be a part of it. And it would be so fun to do a wedding cake tasting, like a wedding vendor night where we go around the house in different spots, kind of like a scavenger hunt. So I set up different areas around the house that my dad could get to and access. One was like a tablescapes table, so she got to pick out all her, dishware and this and that for the tables at our wedding.
All the vendors come to the house and set everything up. Oh no, you did this. It was just.
But my sister and I, Jenna and I, we like dressed like we were bosses. We had the whole notepad going. It was really fun.
My God.
We had a whole like wine tasting section with whiskey and wine, and that was really great. We had a cake tasting. We had a flowers and decor invitation. So we really went all out with this thing. And he just got to experience what it's like, to be around for these moments. And I think Lexi and Dylan really loved that. And we had them dress up, and it was just such a fun, random Wednesday I think it was a Wednesday that we just made into a celebration. We're celebrating Lexi and Dylan getting married, and Dad can be a part of it. So that was an example of one moment that I did.
I've ever heard. That's so cute. And I just love, yes, this is your calling because people can't necessarily go out and do the things that they would have. And some people don't have the ability. They're older, they have things going on, whatever the case is. And to be able to bring happiness and joy to somebody's life who can't experience it otherwise, that is amazing. And I can just, based on the photos I've seen of your dad, I can just see him like roaming through the house with the biggest smile on his face ever.
Well, that's the thing too. Whenever I would set up these moments, I'd wheel him around the house or wheel him into the backyard, and he would just sit there and watch me set the table, watch me put up the decorations, whatever it was. And he would just sit there and watch me with the biggest smile on his face. And I'm like, Daddy, what are you smiling at? Like,
it just made him so happy.
He was like, I love watching you. This is what you're supposed to do. And just seeing the fact that I made his smile today was everything. And if I can allow other people to feel that, then I've won. And that's kind of what I'm all about. But I will share, because I think the photo of me dancing with Dad was on the Instagram. My dad wrote us each a custom love song for our bat mitzvahs. They were 10-minute songs.
Stop it.
So he wrote all the lyrics to them. He was on a plane coming back from a business meeting one time, and he found an ad in a magazine for a custom love songs singer. His name's Byron. He's awesome.
Stop it.
He contacted this guy, and together they wrote and produced 10-minute bat mitzvah songs that you play to the montage. So fast forward, I don't know, 10, 15 years. I can't do the math. Jenna's getting, she got married she got married in September of 2019. And she would always ask Dad, like, Dad, what's going to be our daddy-daughter song at my wedding? Because we would always dance with him. It was a form of exercise. It was a form of PT. We would get him up in the chair, dance with him. He'd last, like, 30 seconds or a minute, but it was the best 30 seconds ever. And he'd always be like, I don't know, like, we have so many songs. So Jenna kind of started this trend, but she reached out to Brian 15 years later.
Oh my.
Her own daddy-daughter song, custom lyrics and everything. Produced it with him and then surprised him. And they actually got to dance at her wedding and a more intimate ceremony at our house before. And then Lexi and I kind of followed in her tracks, and we both wrote and produced our own daddy-daughter song that Lexi danced with. Lexi danced with him at a private kind of celebration with Dylan's family in our backyard. And a week before Jenna's wedding, I did the same. I had a little celebration in the backyard. I did a Fakesgiving, because his favorite meal is Thanksgiving. And I surprised him, and we got to dance. We got to dance that night, and luckily his standing wheelchair was there in time for Jenna's wedding. So I got to dance with him standing up to our song, and that's the memory that I'm going to have forever. And so that's kind of the story with my moments, and I'm really excited to continue these conversations and figure out next steps for myself, because I'm finally in a place where I'm ready, and I'm excited, and it took a really long time to get here. So that kind of goes into the grief a little bit.
Help in any way, we'll talk about that at another time, but I would love to, because I think it's amazing. I think what you have done for your father and what you have the ability to do for other people is just unbelievable. I mean, the quality time that you had a chance to spend with him is something that some people don't get to do in 90 years of a relationship. And it's so incredible. I hope you know, I mean, I know your sisters know because they've messaged me about it both separately, but like, you really are a force to be reckoned with. He would be so incredibly proud of you, what you've done, how you took care of him, how you're continuing to create a legacy because of him. It's just, this is exactly what I want people to learn from, because it is so difficult, but there is proof in the pudding that you can be okay. And especially if you were fortunate to have a relationship with someone the way that you had with your dad and I had with my dad, you spend then your life just trying to celebrate them and remember them and honor them and share it with other people in a way that can help them and support them and make their lives better. So I am very excited for you and happy for you, and also very proud of you.
Thank you. And by the way, it wasn't easy getting here. I didn't really go into that kind of side of grief, but what I will say is that grief is different for every single person. As you can see, I am probably the closest with my sisters that a lot of people are, and or more than most people, but the three of us grieve very differently. Mm-hmm. For me, I would say my experience was a little different because, I was in college in the beginning of his diagnosis when my sister Jenna really skyrocketed with his whole healthcare and became bi-coastal. She was doing 2 weeks east, 2 weeks west, and she really established the foundation for what his healthcare routine would become. And I'd say I followed in her footsteps, and she set the bar high. So Only the best for my dad. But I think for me, my dad and I were attached at the hip, especially in the last year. So my experiences now and my experiences after, I mean, my sisters were still there, my mom was still there, but significantly different.
Mm-hmm.
I I would say I didn't really understand his diagnosis until a few years in, when we became very involved in MSA and had to just learn how to do everything and how to take a step when there was a new progression or he declined. But I I say this because when you first posted about doing this, I was excited to talk about it and open to talking about it because I'm so proud of where I am right now. And sorry, this is so weird.
No, you should be proud of yourself.
Well, I want to just talk about one instance from then till now that was even before he passed away. I think it was probably like 6 weeks before May 23rd, where I suffer from panic attacks sometimes.
Me,
Um,
we talked about that briefly.
but I remember going on a walk with my sisters, and I don't think I've really shared this with anybody, but I remember going on a walk with my sisters. It was the first time the three of us could breathe and had time, just us three, a 20-minute walk up the block and back. And we were probably like 5 minutes in up the block, and somebody had just kind of brought up dad, obviously, and the state he was in, and just being realistic about the situation. And I remember blacking out and just saying, like, stop, stop talking, I can't hear you. And I collapsed and I blacked out. And I vividly remember saying to them, if daddy dies, like, I will die. Like, I actually thought I was going to die. So to think about then and think about now, it's crazy.
No, it's a hug. I hate seeing people cry, especially because I know how hard it is.
It's like it's like proud tears. But I don't know. It's just to think about the place I was in then and think about where I am now. It hasn't been easy. I think I look at grief as an ocean. I know the analogy's been made several times. I've heard about it. I've talked to people about it, but you really do flow with every day, and you flow with what life brings you, and um, you just don't really know when that like tsunami is going to hit you.
Mm-hmm.
Just random times. Something reminds you of him, or someone says something, or you're just, you wake up one day and you feel it a little heavier than others. And I've really come to understand, or proudly say, that I'm okay with it. And I acknowledge when that comes, and I do whatever I need to do to feel good. Because I think if you acknowledge it and you sit with it, and you talk about it, I like to talk about it,
Me
then
too, as you know.
it's vocal, which is fine. Everybody, again, deals with it differently, and no one person is going to grieve the same way.
100%.
And what I love about this platform too, is that people who are on here know that we're talking about grief and good grief and just grief in general. So it's okay to talk about it, whereas sometimes people don't want to bring it up or ask how you're doing because timing or the delivery of the way that it's asked can be off-putting. But I think my people, my circle, my friends, my family know me by now and know how to support me. And it took a while for me to realize what I needed and what I was okay talking about. But I truly couldn't be in the place I am today without any of them.
You can have a big fan club commenting.
Yeah, I can't really even see. There are people who are on here. I haven't really shared to my friends. They know my story and my relationship with my dad. I guess to others, not really much aside from the Meaningful Moments website or Instagram or, posts that have been posted. But that's what I'll say about grief. I think everybody wants a place to connect. Nobody wants to feel alone in it.
Yeah.
I think, you can speak to your experience too. It's like nobody's going to understand your situation. Nobody's going to ever go through what I went through. Not even my sisters, because we all had different experiences. But the need to connect and talk about it, or just cry to somebody, or wanting to share stories about my dad, that's the way that I go about it. I feel like I feel his energy in that it's mind over matter.
Yeah.
This happened. I had time with him, and I made the most of my time, and I don't regret any decision. And I'm now 25, and there's going to be a lot of firsts and a lot of life that he's not here. And grief is like a forever thing.
Right. And we talked about that the other day, which I think is what a lot of people don't realize, because they see you, on the surface. If they don't know your story, the way that you're sharing it now, they see you smiling and happy and going about your day, but they don't know the little nuances that take place, or a movie that you watch, or a song that you hear, or something that somebody says that you have to take a step away and go into the bathroom or go into the room and cry for 5 minutes, wipe your tears, and then you're.
Yeah. I think a lot of people want to be supportive and might think that, people grieve intensely in the weeks and the months after. But that's not true. You're grieving your whole life. It's not like there's an end date. And that's I've worked on tremendously in the last few months, is this idea of expectations and timelines, and kind of like a society pressure of where they think I should be at this point, where I am, and how I'm doing. I've worked through that now to a point where I'm so happy where I am and what I'm doing, and I'm being intentional about my process, and taking the time to relearn my identity and relearn about myself, because I would say confidently for 3 years my identity and myself was very fused with my dad. It was like one and the same, like he says. So I think grief is really interesting. And one thing that's good, I guess, good grief. I never believed in signs before. I thought,
I believed in them either. It was never anything I had to think about, but now I believe in them for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of until it happens. Some people could believe them. I don't know, but I was never really a spiritual person. I'm not really a spiritual person, but there have been signs where I'm like, this is crazy, or I feel it really heavy one day. And this happened the other day. I was driving and thinking about him, and I was just having a rougher morning, and there's a song it's a country song, and it's a song that my sisters and mom and I played on repeat on our way to the sanctuary a few days after, when we had a private family moment. We just played it on repeat so many times, and I'm not really sure why, but it's a great song. When we left the sanctuary that day, I remember holding my sister's hands and just saying, we did it. We went in there, made sure everything was okay, and we left. And we played the song on the way home too. And so anytime I hear that song, I've played it so many times in the last 8 months. That song to me is like, if I did that, I can do anything. And the other day I was having a rough morning, and I got in the car and was just thinking about Dad. And I think maybe I have 500 songs on my Spotify or something. I just shuffled, and the first song on was that song. And it's like, really? Why? But
he's like, you need to hear this song as a reminder that you can get through this and you're going to be fine. And I totally believe in that stuff, because I find my mom and I find dimes, which I've heard from other people that they also find. And it's always like if you're talking about him a lot, or my mom finds them more often than I do, or we'll go in phases, but it's always very like intentional, we say. It's like not like, oh, there's like a pile of change and one happens to be a dime. It's like she'll walk into her closet and like on the ground or next to an item of clothing, or like always so intentional. So I, like you, am not spiritual and never believed really in that kind of stuff, but I do think, and my brother, like, he sent me this article because I was having a really hard time right after, of course. My brother is very scientific and believes very much in evolution and all that kind of stuff. And it was from a physicist, and it was all about energy and how energy physically cannot die. So even if somebody's physical body does, their energy will forever exist. And so I do believe that they are always with us in a way, and in certain places more so than others. Maybe certain places that they loved a lot, whenever you go there, you just feel them because that's something that was very important to them. So yeah, I do believe in that kind of stuff much more now than I ever did.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, I believe that and I agree with that. And I think for me, it's like he's a part of my conversations and my thoughts and my dreams. And I feel his presence in that way, where I'm like, I feel his energy, like kind of what would dad do?
Mm-hmm.
That mentality. And I just try to think of that. But I think for anyone who's listening who is grieving something, it doesn't have to be like a loss in that somebody passed away. I think people grieve a lot of things, like their life before COVID, or I was grieving well before my dad even passed, when he went from standing to sitting, and or he lost his ability to speak. I mean, that's all part of grief. It's losing something. I just think that there is no playbook for this.
Mm-hmm.
Wrong. So you just do whatever you need to do to feel good, and surround yourself with good people who believe in you and who uplift you and who just want the best for you. And your people will understand that, and they'll understand your process. And that's been the most helpful for me, is that I'm around good people. I do things in life that make me happy. I do things that make me feel like I am kind of still living that life. I usually have my Dunkin' every day, because dad and I have our Dunkin' every day.
I love it.
That, I do because that's what we did, and that's always going to be a part of me. And will things be really hard? Of course. Like, Valentine's Day is huge for me with my dad, and this will be the first one, and there will be many firsts. But I have the people here, and hi, Josh. I love you too, brother. I have the people here and the space to honor my dad and celebrate him and feel what I want to feel. And so I encourage people to do the same, with whatever they're grieving, and to just make themselves feel good, because at the end of the day, you only live once, and you need to make the most of your life and celebrate the moments with the people that you love. That's what
Moments.
moment. Yeah.
Well, I am so appreciative because I know this is probably the first time you've opened up to strangers and people you don't know as well about everything that you've gone through. And I'm so appreciative because I know how inspired I have been by your story, and I know it will definitely help other people, just because it's so nice to see that you're here, you're smiling, you have an amazing support system, you're celebrating and honoring your dad every single way, every single day in any way that you can. And I just feel like for anyone who's going through it, to hear these stories from people who are going through it, have gone through it, it's like the most helpful thing. So I am super appreciative for you being so open about it.
Thanks for having me, and thank you for starting an amazing series like this. I'm going to be watching every week, because I think just you won't have the same experience as somebody else, but you can connect with them and learn from them and know that you're not alone. And a lot of people told me after that moment when I thought I wasn't going to make it after he passed, a lot of people said there's another side to it and you will be okay and you won't be alone. So I may have not believed that then, but I believe it now. And so if we can be helpful to other people in this position, then I'll do anything I can.
You certainly will be. And I mean, I'm just like loving the comments. You have such an amazing support.
Who's really, who's official laddie?
That is, but maybe you have a new admirer on here. You never know. Well, oh, and then there's Mimi.
Hey, Mimi.
Mimi, do you know Mimi?
I don't think so.
Her sister from USC.
Okay.
Posted. So it's just such a small world. But thank you, thank you, thank you. When I'm back in LA, we'll have a date. We'll get the pups together. And you know that if there's ever anything that I can do to help or you ever need to talk about anything, you can always reach out to me.
Right back at you.
Thank you. All right. Well, enjoy the Super Bowl.
Happy Super Bowl Sunday, everyone. Let's go have some beers and good food now.
All right. Mwah. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.